fishing, it's in my soul.
Welcome to the Salt Strong Podcast, disrupting fishing entertainment as you know it. Prepare to laugh. Prepare to get to know fishing legends in a whole new and unfiltered way. And on occasion, you might even learn a thing or two about fishing. Here's your host, Joe Simons. Like diamonds.
Hello, Salt Strong Nation. Joe Simons, like diamonds. Got my bro Luke Simons, like diamonds. What's up, dude?
Double like diamonds, man. That's trouble. It's funny. I look in the comments, and some people hate on it, and other people say to keep doing it. So I'm indifferent. I don't know. I don't think there's any way you'll stop doing it. So why?
Oh, definitely not. No, it's part of me. The thing's trademarked and got its own website and Instagram page, and none of that is true, by the way. What should have its own Instagram page is your haircut. If you guys are listening to this and not seeing it, I did that video yesterday with you and me and Deeks, and dude, a lot of people, comments. Yeah, a lot of people like this could be one of the best mullets in the fishing space. I mean, it's looking really good. Yep. But what's funny, I mean, you're catching more fish, or we're getting more insiders. We just passed 15,000 new insiders. Like, our whole membership and the kind of people we're attracting, like, everything's been on fire since your hair's been growing. So
yeah, I feel like I'm even like running faster. I mean, it's like there's a lot of benefits that I really wasn't planning on. So
it's been great news.
Awesome. This COVID hair has really been paying off.
And we're catching some monster fish too, which ties in with this entire episode here. And it's really about being at the right place at the right time. And we were fishing with Captain Peter Deeks. And he's got this one area pretty dialed in. And so a lot of this, what we're going to talk about, does take experience, but it's something that most people are just not even thinking about. And what was interesting, we're on his boat, and he's pointing out, he's like, oh, these people are here. They're here too early. They're over there. They're too early. Like he knew exactly when that bite was going to happen. And a lot of people, if you ever fish like a dock at night, like remember we used to do that as kids on Little Gasparilla Island. We'd fish those docks for snook. And remember, like you'd see them there, like you could literally see 80 snook underneath the light, right? And it would be one thing. It would be like all of a sudden 1 minute they would be on. You might only have a 20-minute window, maybe even less, when it was like you could throw anything and they were destroying it. And then 1 second after, it was like a clock hit. They weren't touching anything. You might get one here and there. And we saw the same thing yesterday, and he knew it. Like that one boat, there's that one guy next to us. He was sitting there the whole time. He was there for like an hour grinding it out, and he leaves. And Deeks is like, man, he's going to miss it. And all of a sudden, you and I are like doubling up. Like it was like everything we threw in all of a sudden was getting hit. And he missed that entire episode because he barely missed that. It was partially tied, partially the amount of water that was coming in. It was coming in incoming. It was partially because the pressure changed, but it was like everything happened at once, and it was like a feeding frenzy. It started, and this is in the middle of the day, by the way, and it was just like boom, and it was so cool to see that, and it was so cool for someone like Deeks, who is on the water 300 days a year, like almost predicted, like, hey, it's going to happen anytime now, and as soon as he said it, boom, we started getting tight lines. It was pretty cool.
The key lesson is to pay attention to the details, especially if you want to go out and consistently catch good fish. So Peter Deeks does this to the extreme, and that's why he catches big fish more than most other people. And I'm pretty like I pay attention to the details, but I was blown away by how much time he put into making sure that we were there and set up at the time that he knew it was going to be.
Yes.
And so in this case, this is an area that gets fished pretty hard. There's a lot of other people gunning for that. So there's like one spot in particular where all like the biggest snook have been hanging out, and he knew where it was, and he knew exactly when they're going to be there. And we don't just show up like 20 minutes beforehand. Like we were there like 2 hours beforehand. And it was so much to the extreme that the dock that we were targeting, they were literally doing construction on it. And so we sat there, and they're like drilling, they're making all sorts of noise. They have like one of those little boats, the little small barges that that hit down the pilings. That thing was like burning right over the spot. And we sat there and waited. He's like, we had to wait on this tide to change. He's like they're gonna be biting in probably about an hour and a half. So we're just kind of just chatting and doing a little bit of fishing, but I'm not really expecting much. And sure enough, as soon as that tide did what he was expecting, even with that barge still there, and then those guys were making all sorts of commotion, we started hooking up. Like I was blown away.
And what's funny, and this is the big learning lesson. If you take away anything, it's this. So we sat in that spot for an hour and a half. Like he got us positioned perfectly. We were anchored perfectly. And you and I, like you said, we were kind of fishing. Like I was getting bored. And you remember, I even said to Deeks, I was like, man, you surely don't want to go try somewhere else. And that's what most anglers would have done. They were literally, you think about it, if you fished a spot for an hour and a half, we hadn't had a single bite. And we were fishing, like not a single bite. I had artificial lure, Luke had live bait, not a single bite. And we could see fish, like we could see shadows. We knew there's some fish down there. Not a single bite for an hour and a half. Most people would have left. We saw people leave. And because we stuck it out, because Deeks is like, no, it's about to happen. And all of a sudden it was just like a dinner bell rang. And all of a sudden we started getting tight lines and catching monster snook. I mean, it was crazy. And yet here I was literally saying, you remember, I was like, man, Deeks, like maybe we should just go try to catch some smaller ones somewhere else just to get some tight lines. I was like bored. But man, thank goodness you have someone who has it dialed in and who has a little bit of patience. And a lot of it, you like you said, it's paying attention. And I think even documenting, when I spent that, 5 nights down in Placida, and I used to go fish that little bridge right there near the condo with Shauna. And I had it dialed in. I caught fish every single night and morning, because that first time I did it, I started writing down. I was like, all right, they're literally, same thing. It was like, it was an instant, like it was at 7:02, they just started biting. From 7:02 to like 7:35, I could almost feel like every cast, something would either thump it or I'd get a fish on, and then it died. And so the next night, you fast forward an hour basically, and it just kept happening over and over again. It was just like, this was like the perfect period to get a strike. And most people miss that period, and or they ended up going to some other place, and that period is the time where they're traveling or trying to power pole somewhere else, and they've literally missed their chance to get to really get one of the best bites of the day. And let's talk too about why that happened, right? What caused those fish, in your opinion, to all of a sudden just be turned on? It was like dinner bell, feeding time.
Well, it was based on the spot. So every spot is different. Different spots are better during different tidal phases, different current movements, and even.
Wait a minute! I thought fishing was easy. I thought there was just one answer.
Yeah. I wish that was the case. If it was, everybody'd be catching giant fish every trip. So really, every spot is different. It's spot dependent on when that is, and so I don't recommend somebody to sit in a spot and sit there and sit there and sit there and just hope that the fish will start. Like this is what you do after you've been to a spot a bunch of times and you've seen the intricacies on exactly when the fish are biting and when they're not biting. So for most people, if you're in a spot for 10, 15 minutes and nothing's happening, pick up a move and then wait on a good time, right? And then just take note of when it's good. Otherwise, you could be sitting in dead zones for a long time. So really, again, the key lesson is really just to pay, like when you get into a good bite, take note of the details, write it down. Like I feel like I have a bad memory for most things, but like I remember like at least all the good fish I caught, exactly what lure it was and what the water was doing. So I just kind of do it in my mind or just from looking back at the insider reports, but just pay attention to the details. And you'll see over time, you will, especially for spots that you fish a lot, you're going to see trends on exactly when the best periods are, whether it's a time of day or a tide phase. In general, it's going to be a tide phase in a certain time of the phase, whether it's coming in or it's going out, the beginning, middle, or end. It's going to be one of those quadrants. And then when a storm pushes through, so yesterday the bite turned on exactly when Peter said. This big storm was coming up, and like lightning was starting to get close. Like I was like about ready to call it early, and we about did. We picked up the anchor and then kept eyeing the storm, and sure enough, it like wasn't coming at us very quickly. So we fortunately went back again. That's when most of the action happened. And right when that storm was coming in, the pressure changed. The wind started picking up. It felt pretty gnarly out there, and the fish just totally fired up. Every single time we threw in there, we were hooking up with a beast. Probably like
it felt like it dropped like 10 degrees, right? I mean, it was
a legit cold front. It was like the first cold front of the year that I felt like that. And yeah, the wind started cranking, just like before a front comes in, you can feel difference difference in the air temp, the wind's picking up. You can even like smell, I feel like you even like smell the rain. It's like one of those situations. And for some reason, in passes in particular, it's seen in inlets, passes and inlets, that's when the bite like turns on. So I used to do that. I used to fish Sebastian Inlet a lot at night, and it was best when those cold fronts in the wintertime are pushing through, and the weather's terrible. Like, it's not fun conditions, but man, those fish are really fired up.
Yeah. We're not recommending to sit out there and wait for a storm to come either. Obviously, use your very, very best judgment on that, especially if there's lightning. Get the heck out of there. A little rain, not as worried about. But if it's lightning, I'd bolt out of there. Get it? Pun intended. Oh, yeah.
We get it. Yeah, usually when you have to say, do you get it? It's probably not a very good one, Jeff.
That's debatable. That's debatable. It's just tough ground here.
But yeah, the really unique, like the level of analysis that Peter has put into that spot was evident in the fact that we got there, right? We got there the time that we were planning on. What was not planned is that there'd be dock work on this dock, like literally they put in 2 pilings while we were sitting there, like 30 feet away. Like, never would I ever think that.
We're talking to the guys. The construction workers were that close. We're like,
we're listening to construction guys.
Hey, do you want a bite of our sandwich? Close.
And they had one of those big old clang things, when they actually, hammer the pilings down. And I was like, oh my gosh, please don't tell me they're going to start beating it. So fortunately, they didn't use that, but they were using one of those hoses where they get the hose down and they basically like pump out the sand and the piling goes down. And literally, so sand is coming up everywhere. They're gunning the boat, that little barge boat. And so the prop stir is the prop wash is going like literally right, like we're in it. And it's going right over the spot. Peter's like, yeah, they're going to be right here. They're going to be right here as soon as the tide turns. And like, it was right where this guy's prop was just burning up. And so I was sitting there thinking, there's no way. I was like, there's no way we're going to catch anything. Like, this is insane. And sure enough, like exactly when Peter said they were going to be there, we started getting hits. And again, it was just a testament to how effective putting time into a spot can be. Only do it for really good spots. Like a lot of wade fishing guys and pier fishermen, like they do it to the T because they're out there all the time. Yep. There's a small amount of real estate to fish. And so the way to get better than everybody else is to know exactly how that real estate fishes throughout the different tide swings and current periods. And those details are what separates the people who are catching a ton of fish to those who aren't. Yep. And it's as simple as that. It's just they paid attention to the details, they put in their time, and they truly learned how the fish behave for that particular spot.
And if you're wondering how to keep track of this the best way, well, old school is a notepad. Then again, you could spill coffee on it, water. Your dog could chew it up. Otis could literally chew up any type of notepad, big or small. Otis chews them all. So we recommend our Insider Club. That's another reason we built that private community. It's, every angler has their own essentially, kind of ongoing, never-ending wall that's, based on dates and based on where you were, and you can document all that stuff. And it was because a lot of it's incoming or outgoing, right? And in that case, Peter knew that incoming tide is bringing in that clean water, right? That's where he wanted it. And it was also towards the end, right? So we'll give you a little tip on that because he even said, hey, the beginning will be okay, right? And we got some bites right when that happened. And he's like, in the middle, when it's like really moving, it's hard for us as fishermen. It's hard to keep our baits down. It's hard for the fish. I mean, end of the day, they're still like us. They're kind of lazy feeders. Like they don't want to have to work too hard. And then he's like, towards that tail end is when it's really going to fire up. And then it did. And for us, it was like that perfect storm. It was getting closer to the tail end of the incoming. And we had the storm pressure dropping the barometric pressure. I mean, it was nuts, dude. I wanted to stay out there longer, minus the nasty storm coming our way.
Yeah, and again, this isn't the type of stuff that we really teach and focus on in the Insider Club. This is like just super niche, spot specific. Every spot is different. It really depends on how the water goes around whatever structure you're fishing, and the seasonality. In this case, we were targeting big snook. So big snook are in this area for like 2 weeks. It's like a very short time of the year. And this is like a very unique situation that it really only applies to that one specific zone. And so that's unlike the things we typically teach, which is the macro, right? Where how does the overall redfish, behavior, like what will their preferences and tendencies, like what areas will they be in whatever bay you're fishing? And then what are the most common things that really apply across the board, based on how redfish react to changing water temperatures, to changing seasons, to current, right, and to wind exposure, those sorts of things, because that applies across the board. That's like the more macro stuff. The minute level of details, we're fishing a particular spot, where you have to like hammer down the nits and grits. That's more for if you're going to go to a specific spot over and over and over and over again to really get it dialed in.
Yep. So what do you think about this? I've seen quite a few posts, both in our Facebook group and in our private insider club, where a somewhat newer angler has basically done the hardest part, which is find the 3 Bs. And if you don't know the 3 Bs, we preach them all the time. It's finding birds, and that could be, birds that are sitting, diving, just any kind of bird activity. Usually means they're feeding on bait, and then some boils, which means, some type of predator fish that is stirring up some mud, silt, whatever it is. You have, it could even be a tailing redfish, but you're seeing signs of all that. And I've seen some posts recently where a newer angler finds all 3 of them, which is really tough to do, right? Like that should be a feeding zone, but they fish it for a while, like, oh, it wouldn't hit anything. I threw everything in my tackle box, and this place stinks. And I disagree with that. And I'm guessing you probably do. Like that should be a good spot. They just might have missed that window, right? And I agree with you that you probably shouldn't sit there an hour and a half, but I would keep going back to an area like that as much as I could during that day or two to find out what that time is. Because once you get that time, I mean, it's game changing. Now, like you once again, you take note of it, and that's how you slowly dial in an area. What I hate seeing is, like this one gentleman, he had said, man, I found everything. There's literally tailing redfish. There's birds diving, and it wouldn't hit anything. And then he leaves and goes and fishes a bunch of crappy areas and doesn't see any more activity the whole day. Like, you would have been better off staying in that one spot and just keep fishing or back up for a little while, give them a break. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, most times when somebody gets to a good spot, right, where there's feeding activity, whether it's birds feeding or the actual predator fish feeding, and they're not catching anything, it's almost always due to a bad approach, where they came in the wrong way or came in from the wrong direction so that you're not presenting your baits properly, or you just flat out spook the fish. You're stomping on the boat, right? Those fish, I mean, they're not stupid, right? Even if they're feeding, they're always alert for danger. And so in most cases, it's pull away, let them settle down, and then come back like 15, 20 minutes later. Or it's rarely a lure problem. A lot of people are saying, I've tried every lure in my tackle box. What probably happened is that they sat in the wrong spot, either too close or the wrong direction from the fish, and they were just throwing a lure that probably would have worked otherwise. They were just doing it in the wrong way, and they kept doing it over and over again in the wrong way, and that continued the same bad results. So in most situations, if there's actual feeding activity and you just have a decent lure that somewhat mimics whatever the fish are feeding on, like in particular, like redfish, sea trout, and snook, and flounder too, I mean, they're all pretty aggressive fish. Like if they're actually feeding and you have a lure that even is close to what they're looking for, they will typically hit. So if they're not hitting, that's usually something wrong with the angler. I know because that's been me for many years, and I'm just delivering the hard truth. Because once you do set up properly, and I did this in that insider report that I did with Dad back, it was, I guess, a year ago. We got onto some fish. So we were in one spot. We weren't catching anything. We didn't change lures, right? We weren't seeing the 3 Bs. So instead of changing out every lure and trying to make something happen in a bad spot, we just went off to a new spot, exploring some new areas, and then we got into some good redfish. And like literally, it was really good feed. And so we started catching them, and then after a while, I was like, let me just like test out some different lures. So I had a white jerkbait that I started with, then I changed to a smaller dark one. Then I changed to a bigger black one, right? It was like the second one was root beer and yellowtail. Then I did a big black, like one that was 6 inches. They hit that. They were hitting everything. I did a white topwater. They hit it. I did a bullfrog, a brown bullfrog lure that's for bass fishing. They hit that. And long story short, they were hitting whatever we threw in there because it was a good feeding zone. And when you find those feeding zones, it doesn't really matter what lure you have. So as anglers, it's really on us to always make sure that we're in a good feeding zone, because once we do that, everything else is easier. And so that's really been the biggest game changer for me over the years of trawling. Because remember, Joe, we used to go to those spots that Dennis showed us when we caught our first slam, and we were like high-fiving, like, oh my gosh, we finally got a slam spot. And we went back there over and over and over again. And no matter how many times we went, we were trying to analyze those details, but it just simply like wasn't a good spot that we could like really niche down to like do what Peter did.
Yeah.
Because that's rare. Like that's very rare to have a spot like that where it's like truly clockwork day in and day out. In many cases, it'll be one day, and then next day you'll have like a 3 or 4 day window, maybe a week. But it's very rare that it's like an all year long thing. And so I recommend to not sit and wait for 2 hours like we did, unless you have like really spent time there and okay, they're gonna turn on at this period.
Yeah, I mean, if you can see like 40 snook underneath your boat and they're in that spot, then it could be worth waiting a little bit till it turns, which is what we could see. I mean, we could literally see the fish down there. That's a little bit different. I think one of the best pieces of advice, and this is something you do, I think, more naturally now, is once you find a type of area that's working. Like we had a gentleman in the community that had made a report, and he had an area picked out. He watched the spot dissections that we do for our insider members. He went to that area, and he right off the bat he fished a point, because we talked about fishing some points that had some water moving around, some good current moving around it, and caught a flounder. And instead of like not only just sticking there but trying to recreate that, he starts going off and doing other stuff. He's like, man, I wish I just stick to the points. The only 2 fish I caught in the entire 6 hours of fishing were points, right, that have moving water. And what I see you do is once you have that same aha moment, you don't go keep trying random spots. You go try to recreate every point with moving water you can, right? You skip all the other crap, and you're like, all right, hey, there's another little spoil island that has a point with current. Let's go hit that. And that's that's a trend, right? That's based on trends. And I think so many anglers, including me, forever, like you get that one good bite, and you're like, oh, I'm just going to keep fishing all around here. And then afterwards, you're like, man, the only fish I caught were in that one spot. Why didn't I just go try to recreate that over and over again?
Yeah, because we all do it, and I still do. I mean, I think the biggest mistake that we all make, myself included, I still make it, even though I preach all the time that you shouldn't do this, is that we have our spots, whether it's a half dozen spots or a dozen spots or 30 spots that we've caught fish on, right? So we've caught fish there, so there are confident spots. And we get on a trend, like what Joe mentioned, our first spot of the day, we find that the fish are positioning, say, on the deep side of a dock. And we get them. And then we have a decision, okay, like, bite slow down. Do we go find a similar spot like that with docks in the same depth of water with the same amount of current flow and current and wind exposure? Or do we go to this spot over here that I fished great last year that has mangroves and it's all shallow, like totally different type of spot?
Yeah.
The answer is go find some more docks that have a similar situation, because that is going to have a much higher chance of having success, because you literally just proved it a second ago.
Yep.
Recency is so much more important than like a long-term trend.
Yes.
Like in this case, I mean, Peter, I don't know, I can't remember. I think he goes down like 2 or 3 days a week. So he goes down there a lot. Plus he's in contact with the guides down there. And so like they have it dialed in. Like they're either he's there or one of his friends is there almost every day. So like they know exactly what's happening. For like weekend warriors, you just can't do that. Right. And so it's really about having a network and or getting out on the water as much as possible. Clearly the network is easier. That was definitely my biggest impact when I started fishing tournaments and just befriended a couple other teams. Like we were all the corporate guys who had full-time jobs and couldn't fish all the time, and we were having to go against full-time guides, and it's really hard to do that, right? So you have to really combine, I guess, human intelligence. And what's way more important than anything is what happened yesterday or what happened the day before yesterday than what happened like the past 30 years at this spot. Like I could, every year is so different. And just having the recency stuff is huge. Even what happened last week. I'll take what happened last week than what happened the past 3 years.
Yep.
Because it's just fish move around so much, and just having some recent info on the type of spot that the fish are holding based on the conditions, that is invaluable.
Which is a big part of our Insider Club. If you guys haven't joined, come join us.
Exactly what I did. And that's why we do the weekly game plan. Yeah, the weekly game plan we do every Friday just highlights the most recent trends, so that if people don't have time, it does it under 10 minutes. So anybody who doesn't have time, which is most people, to go through all the content that comes out every week, it's just, hey, here's what you need to focus on. Here's the trends that's been happening. Here's what to look for. Here's how to find those spots. And then here's the lures to use in those spots. And it just makes it all easier.
Yeah, go for it.
Go for it.
I had a young man, I believe it was via Instagram, a direct message, and he's like, "Hey, I'm really struggling to catch redfish in my area." He showed me the area, and I gave him some tips. He's like, "All right, I'm joining." He's like, "Do you guys have a ton of spots for me?" And I said, "Actually, we don't." And I was like, "We don't sell spots." And I said, "You want to know why?" I was like, "Because spots are worthless, right? When you consider that fish move every single day, every single tide cycle." I was like, what's more important and what we offer are trends. And we actually get on a map every single Friday in 10 minutes or less and show you what types of spots to fish in your area based on trends, based on all the intel that we're gathering from our entire community, based on our on the water trips every week. And it works. I mean, we get testimonials daily of people that are saying, "Man, you guys changed everything for me just in the 10-minute video." Not even to mention the discounts on tackle and all the other how-to tips and comparisons and rod and reel reviews, et cetera, that we do for our Insider Club. And and as soon as you hear that, he's like, "Oh, okay, I'm in. I get it." Because that's powerful, right? Because we all know, we've all bought those top spot maps, and not to pick on them, but just any of those little spot maps in general. I think they're helpful because it gives you an idea of where fish could be. But then again, it's not that helpful because you get reliant on a GPS spot, and then you get there and you realize, "Oh man, this thing stinks. Like, this doesn't even look like this anymore." Or like, it's land because it's crazy low tide. Versus when you go off a trend on what's working right now, putting you in that 90-10 zone, where we always talk about that 90% of the feeding fish are in 10% of an area because of trends, because of the stuff that this whole podcast is talking about, because of the small little notes that guys like Luke and guys like other fishing coaches are taking every week on, all right, putting this whole puzzle together, right? All right, these fish have all been in this depth. These fish have all been feeding on this type of bait fish, anywhere from Texas to Florida to the Carolinas. And it shifts a little bit. It's a little bit different, but then again, it's all very, very much the same. And these all fish are wired the same. They all have the same biology, the same makeup. They all have the same wants and needs, just like humans, regardless of where we live. We all kind of have the same wants and needs as people. Fish are the same way. They're looking for bait. They're looking for shelter. They're trying not to get killed. And when you kind of throw all that together, you're like, all right, well, where would they be in this scenario? And it makes it a whole lot easier, which is what we promise as an Insider members, to save you time and then save you money. So if you haven't joined us, come join us. saltstrong.com. Insider Club, baby. 15,000 plus now. Whoop, whoop.
Yep, just hit the 50,000. Yeah, and what has surprised me really since starting Salt Strong is, started dialing in the trends for every species is different, right? Redfish, snook, trout, flounder, they're all different. They all have their nuances, but they're way more consistent across regions than I ever thought. Like I used to fish. I grew up fishing Boca Grande and Tampa. Then I moved to Melbourne and fished in the Indian River, and I was surprised at how similar the fisheries were. And I was like, hey, maybe it's just a Florida thing. And so we did the inshore slammer course. That was the very first course that we did was once we started Salt Strong. And I remember, people in Florida were having, going in and had some good testimonials. So, that's cool. It's working in the Panhandle. It's working further south. And I remember that some Texas people started getting into it. So I was like, oh man, like I was worried there's gonna be some bad reviews coming in. And sure enough, those same trends, right, the same trends that were taught and still are taught in that course, and what we highlight every week in the Insider Club, that are species specific, that are behavioral, based on on how a redfish or snook or tarpon or snook reacts to the changing conditions. The same exact reactions occur to redfish in Florida as they do in Texas, as they do in the Carolinas, and everywhere in between. So that was the really cool thing that really blew my mind, I should say, since just networking with people throughout the community, throughout the Insider Club.
Yep, love it.
We know people all across the board.
Hope you guys join us. And what the other thing that blew my mind recently is this underwater bait forensics course. Holy smokes. Thing is sick. There's like 100 videos, and they're all short, of just showing how every single type of bait really looks underwater. And Peter, I love how he says it. He's like, man, so many people, they get on my boat. I see them on other captains' boats. I see them out there as weekend warriors, and they think just because they got lively bait, they can catch a dozen, like our boy Lunker Dog says, that they're just going to go out there and catch fish, that just because they got live bait that everything wants to eat. And he's like, that is so not true. He's like, so many people miss so many opportunities because they rig it wrong. The same with the salt plastic, right? You could be in the perfect spot with the perfect lure, the right color and everything, slam shady. And if you rig it wrong and it's helicoptering and you don't know what it looks like underwater, you don't have a chance. And he's like, it happens time and time and time again. He's like, it happens to me sometimes. I get sloppy, you get real excited. And he's like, even just the wrong hook size, the wrong weight, even just hooking it centimeters away from the right place, even the wrong side can affect. I mean, it's pretty mind-boggling. So if you guys haven't checked that out, check that out as well. All at saltstrong.com/products. You can join us in the club there. Check out all of the master courses, including the inshore slammer that Luke talked about. That's really the I think that's our longest lasting one, right? And it's probably the most purchased one, because that was the first one, and then redfish was after that. Yeah,
it's good. And the bait forensics is really is awesome. It's unique in the fact that it actually shows the different baits underwater, rigged different ways to show the good and the bad, like what happens when it's rigged properly, and then what it looks like when it's not rigged properly. And it's a game changer. Obviously, for smaller fish that are let's just say a little bit dumber fish, even a poorly rigged bait can still work. But if you're going after like the big like trophies, like what Peter specializes in, paying attention to these details is extremely important.
Yep.
And it's surprising how, as Joe mentioned, just rigging it just slightly different, it can totally either wreck or totally make the bait as far as getting the trophies to eat. So.
Yep. Cool. Well, check that out. It's saltstrong.com/products. That's saltstrong.com/products. And otherwise, we'll see you guys on the next episode. We are out. Peace. Let's go hit the water, do some fishing when the storm passes.
Jeez. Yeah, there's been a lot of afternoon thunderstorms. Stay safe out there for the lightning. If everybody going out in the afternoon, especially, it's been crazy over here.
No doubt. All right, we out, guys. Thank you. We appreciate you. Peace.
See ya.
'Cause fishing, it's in my soul.